and people back for more. So what I've decided to do, I didn't get through everything first time that I wanted to do. But what I thought I'd do is that, given that a lot of you very kindly stayed behind for 15 minutes of extra time last time, and that was recorded, and my slides will be visible, and nothing in lecture 2 actually logically depends on any of that stuff, I've decided basically to take that stuff as roughly covered, or given some exposure to it anyway, move on to the originally intended lecture 2. But just to start with 5 minutes of just following up on a couple of points from last time. So remember, I had this picture of this three-way trade-off between the different kinds of complexity here. And various people asked good questions about what exactly are these arrows? Are they actually translations, interpretations of one system in another? And if they're not, what are they? So I've thought a bit more about this, and I can give just a report on what I've concluded. So this Dialectica translation here, which is the thing we're going to be talking about today, that's definitely a translation, provability, preserving translation from one proof system into another. This direction here can also be cast as a translation from proof systems. That's good. So can this arrow up here, because you can prove in piano arithmetic that these various transfinite induction principles are valid, so that works. The two arrows that have this as target, they can't really be seen as translations, because this language here is the same language as just the language of PRA. We've just got quantifier 3 formulae. So the language is too weak to express most of what goes on in these other two systems. Nonetheless, we can say that both of these arrows here do represent constructions that give you relative consistency proofs. In other words, you can show that if this system here with transfinite induction is consistent, then so is this system here. So an inconsistency here would yield an inconsistency down here, and likewise this arrow. So we get a relative consistency proof, which can itself be conducted within this weak base system PRA. So we get something here. This remaining arrow here, what I had in mind here was the fact that the actual recursion principles for these various ordinals can be coded up in system T. It's sort of transfinite recursive. So that's more computational than logical thing. I'm not sure what that gives you on the logical side, maybe something. So thank you for those for forcing me to think that through. And then just carry on.
John, quick question there.
Yeah.
What is recursion, logically speaking?
Oh goodness.
Or maybe don't answer if it's too complicated.
I'm not sure. It would probably take me a while to tune into what the question was. So can we? Yeah, I'm happy to try that offline.
The ability to do things over and over again.
Okay, and then we had decided that to show any sort of normalization property of system T, we want these taped predicates or logical relations, which are defined by induction on the type. And I said this is a very powerful method, powerful in more than one way. What I really didn't say explicitly is there's genuine proof theoretic power here, and that this proof using logical relations is something that can't be conducted, can't be formalized within piano arithmetic itself. Because the idea, and in fact the theorem can't be proved in piano arithmetic itself because of the relative consistency thing I've mentioned. So there is that each of these, for each of these types, you individually, you can write a formula in first order arithmetic that defines these predicates. But these formulae get more and more and more complex as you go up the types. So there's no way you can uniformly define the whole family of them within first order arithmetic, which is what you'd need to conduct this proof. So you can sort of locally do this proof within piano arithmetic, but not globally. So it's very powerful. It's got a lot of power under it. It's deceptive because it looks so simple. this definition, but there's real power under the hood. You could do something. I made the point that maybe if it's a way of proving things, if you're primarily interested in terms of a certain type, but they may have subterms of higher types, it's a way of generalizing your induction claim so that you can manage that. So just to say, we this little example of every t definable function, type 2 function being continuous. This is another example because this is a property where we're primarily interested in something at type 2, but that your term for that type 2 function might have subterms. So it's a way of just generalizing this claim to something that lets you do a proof by induction on term structure. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say, picking up from last time. So welcome to lecture 2. Thanks for coming again. In this, I gave a conceptual overview of what the dialectical interpretation was achieved last time. So now we're going to look a bit more detail about how that actually works and how that lets us give a sort of computational meaning even to classical proofs. So we'll see some things you can get from the dialectical interpretation. First, an interesting meta theorem and proof theory, and then a small example of it, an actual program. Yeah, this application that points 2 and 3 there are slightly the wrong way around in terms of the order I'll be covering them. And then at the end, probably in extra time, if people are interested, I'll give just a glimpse of an amazing extension of this whole technology due to Spector, which it rolls it out to the whole full second order arithmetic using an extension of system T with what's called bar recursion. So there's no way I could give that. That would take at least one whole lecture, probably more, to give a full introduction to Spector's interpretation. But it's such an amazing thing. I want to say a bit about it. Okay, so we're going to be looking at various logical proof systems here. There's a bit of a problem with anything to do with proof theory that, there's sort of excessive numbers of, you have excessive numbers of logical systems flying around with complicated names, and it's very unintuitive. I've tried my best to sort of keep it simple here, but nevertheless, just to give you an overview of the main characters. So start with heating arithmetic, which is a first order theory of arithmetic. So theory of natural numbers with all these characters you're probably very familiar with. Stuff you can say with that. The Peano axioms, including induction for any first order formula. And we've got intuitionistic predicate logic. So the usual rules of logic projectives, but without excluding them. Okay, so that's maybe just probably familiar. And then if you make it for its classical counterpart, if you extend this with by adding in excluding middle, you get the familiar system of Peano arithmetic. Okay. Okay. Now there are also these higher versions of these with higher types added. So HA and PA are both just for the natural numbers, but if we look at the simple types that you can build for the natural numbers with arrows, you can have higher order versions of these where you basically have a logical sort for each type. And the term language, now we may as well, it's convenient to take to be system T itself. So any program, anything you write in system T is a term in this language. We're going to allow equality only for ground type. You can then define sort of equality at high type from that. But so our basic predicate will be equality at ground type. But we've got variables at all types, and we've got quantification at all types. Again, we've got induction for arbitrary formulae. But for those of you who know what this means, there are no comprehension principles in this. So this is proof theoretically actually no stronger than HA itself. This is just, this is actually, HA is actually a conservative extension of HA, for those of you who know what that means. But nevertheless, it's got the higher types, but it's HA with higher types built in. So that's and it includes system T as its term language. And then likewise, PA with high types thrown in, or else HA omega with exclude middle thrown in is the classical counterpart to this. Once again, that's actually conservative over plain PA. And then the target system, so these are languages we're going to be translating from broadly. And the target system we're going to be translating things into. And this is going to be what I talked about last time as a sort of higher order version of primitive recursive arithmetic. And I informally called it PRA omega in lecture 1, but that's not its proper name. It's typically officially called something like quantifier-free HA omega. So it's the fragment of HA omega where you just don't have quantifiers, okay? You have everything else, and you have induction for all the formulae you can write down. But you don't have for all that exists. So it has the flavor of primitive recursive arithmetic. You know, we've just got these open formulae, any closed instance of which is something you can just check by computation. So Phil asked yesterday, could you just call this system T itself? So there is a case that you maybe should, because that's what Gödel meant. So there is no real uniformity in the literature, but I would say it's probably more common than not these days to use T to refer to just the term language. For instance, in Girard's book, Proofs and Types, which is what I grew up with, T is the term language, and there's no mention of this sort of logic built on something else.
It's a question from Phil.
Okay.
Phil?
Hi.
Hi.
So thanks for all this. I just noticed in this task that you've got here, right? T is the only one that has the recursion principle of T, right? In PA, in HA, you just have plus and times, which I believe is weaker than the recursion principle of T. Is that right? And so even though it's called QF HA omega, it actually has one more thing, which is the recursion operator of T. Or is that wrong? In fact, the recursion operator of T also appears in HA.
Right. Yeah. You don't, in HA itself, you don't have.
Oh, I see. HA omega has everything that's in T. I missed that one. Okay.
That's first order stuff. That's the idea. You can code. You can prove. You can. So the sense in which HA omega is conservative is anything that's provably, any function that's provably total in HA omega is already provably total in HA. But you have to sort of work for that. You don't directly have the recursors that you have in HA omega available in HA.
But you're saying, in fact, in HA, you could define anything that you could define with the recursors.
At first order, yes.
So, okay, I wanted to just check on what at first order means. So
okay.
HA omega or T, I can define Ackermann's function. Can I do that in HA?
Yes, in the sense that you can prove a theorem which says for all x there exists a unique y such that something equivalent to y is Ackermann's function applied to x. So if you regard a formula, a provable formula like that as an implicit definition of a first order function, then in that sense.
Okay, so HA goes beyond primitive recursion because it has Ackermann's function in it.
What you can prove to be total in HA goes beyond primitive recursion.
Right. Okay, that's really helpful. I don't want to slow you down too much, but I just wanted to make sure I was following appropriately. Thank you.
That's cool. Okay, thanks. So, okay, is this okay for this? Does everyone feel they know well enough what system?
I already want to, I do not know, sorry for a beginner question. What are the comprehension axioms for?
Oh, can I just say you don't need to know because
okay.
you don't because
okay.
then they're not there.
And I'll ask a beginner's question. What does it mean to have the induction axioms when you don't have quantifiers?
Oh right. Oh okay. Maybe you have.
If we think of induction as giving a uniform.
You have induction rule.
A rule. Very good.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. If I said induction axiom, I didn't No, I think I'm okay there.
Cool.
Okay, yeah. Good question, good question. Thank you for that. Yeah, okay. So now let's see how Gödel did this interpretation. Now the published paper that everyone references is this 1958 paper, which was published in a journal called Dialectica. That's how it gets its name. But I would suggest if you want to read something by Gödel, don't read that. That's in a very sort of, it's written more in the style of the sort of extended abstract. It's very telegraphic, presupposes a lot of intellectual context. But read his Yale lecture from 1941, which was published in the Collected Works, Volume 3, which is a beautifully clear and intuitive guide to the ideas, and shows that his thinking of this was already very, very mature by 1941. So that would be my recommendation. So I tried to model my preaching in the book on that as close as possible. So what's the idea? So Gödel said that, okay, his plan was as follows. First of all, translate each formula of PA, take PA as the language we're trying to interpret, into first of all an HA omega formula. So HA omega, because we want the higher types of system T here. So of this quite simple form, so we've got some exists quantifiers and for all quantifiers, and then something in that with it which is quantifier free. Okay, so however complicated A might be in terms of its logical complexity, we're going to translate it into something that's no more complicated than this. Okay, so just to follow on the running example I had from last time. So the theorem that there are infinitely many primes might get translated into something like there exists a function f, and we're not going to say what it is, but what we think of this claim as saying is there's some function f which, given any y, will produce a number bigger than y, which is prime. So that's the kind of thing we're expecting to get. So right, and so we do this translation for all formulae, whether provable or not. Okay, but given a formula that is actually provable, given an actual proof of A, we can do better. So here we've sort of just not said what these x are, what this f is. We've just declared that the way we're thinking of the meaning of this formula is that there are some such f. So given an actual proof of this, you can extract specific terms t to plug in for x here. So we rather than saying there exists an x, we actually give a concrete x, namely these terms t, and then we have this for all y quantifier, which then becomes the outermost thing we can just drop. So we now say just that p is true for t and y, and this is and moreover that this is provable in our target system of quantifier free HA omega. Let's try and give some intuition for this. Okay, so let me drop the arrows above x and y for a while. So we think of the x variable here as ranging over some kind of witnesses or evidence, some kind of witness or evidence you might put forward in defense of, in support of your statement A. So, like in this formula, there exists f such that blah blah blah. We're saying there exists a function which provides a witness for there being infinitely many primes in this sense. Okay. And if you have a proof, you can actually give one such defense or witness. And then the other variables, y, we say y ranges over attacks or challenges that an opponent might offer. Okay, so you might give it a certain function here that produces a prime number bigger than any given number, and then what you're claiming is that any number, any challenge anyone throws at you, any particular y, when you actually do this calculation, you'll find that this comes out true. So we can think here of a sort of process that proceeds in just 3 stages. So the first stage is the counsel for the defense offers some kind of operation or some kind of witness in favor of the statement A, and then the counsel for the prosecution challenges that and says, well, what about this example A? Okay, and then we just do the calculate because this P is quantifier free. Once we've got X and Y, we can just by calculation determine whether this is true or not. And P will say the defense wins that round. So in other words, that value of X successfully defends A against the attack given by Y. So that's the intuition here. Think about attack and defense. And as I said before, it's nice that however complicated your A is, you get something of this simple form with just these 3 stages, if you like. So just as Gödel himself gave this translation, I'd say first of all for hating arithmetic, and then to get the interpretation for PA, he combined it with so-called double negation translation, which, as many of you may know, gets you from classical system to the intuitionistic one by sticking in sufficiently many double negations at suitable points. So the idea is, if Ian.
John, not the negation part, but the earlier part. You say we just get a single X or single fraction of X and single fraction of Y, and that's somehow simpler. Whatever the logical complexity of the PA formula is perhaps where, if it is complex, then perhaps that moves into the fact that types of X and Y.
Yeah. This was just an abbreviation device. I'm now slightly regretting just to save a few arrows.
No, but even with X bar, the types of the X's are quite.
That's absolutely right. The number and types of the X's and Y's will depend on the complexity, the logical complexity of A.
In particular, even in your example of proof of defense, is the fact you have to give a defense against all possible attacks up front rather than the other way around.
Yeah. So even in this prime numbers example, we've got a statement that starts off being purely first order, and then we've got this function. So that's the first stage in this complexification that goes on.
And you have to do that before you know what Y you're trying to match. So
yes. We'll see. You'll see more of this will become clearer the way that.
And so the extracted terms T, am I right in saying that they're closed terms?
It depends on whether if P has 3 variables other than X and Y, then those variables are allowed to appear in the T terms as well.
Oh, right. Do the Y's appear in T?
No, that's important. The Y's don't appear in said that. So Y's don't appear, but you can do this in the presence of 3 variables.
Okay.
So good question. Okay.
Just a nitpick. When you say translate each A or PA into HA omega formula, you're actually translating into a QF HA omega formula, are you not? Or is that?
Well, you end up with a QF HA omega formula, but
step.
intermediate. This intermediate step here is.
Oh, right. So
I just wanted this to allow these sort of temporary quantifiers here.
Right, and then it is fixed.
Yeah, and then it's sort of
this slight.
Yeah, that's good. It's good. Okay, so that's what Gödel did, and then but once you've done that, it's quite easy to observe that everything works just as easily if, as your source languages, you start from HA omega or PA omega. So we start with languages that have both quantifier complexity and type complexity, and you're reducing it to have something that just has type complexity. That all works fine. So basically, you don't have to do anything new or different. So we may as well. So Gödel did it just for the first order systems, but we may as well do it at the work from the outset with these higher order systems. So the end of the day, we get a translation from PA omega to this quantified free HA. Okay.
Oh, I realised why I was getting a bit confused. I was doing a substitution. You said that you first did it for HA. And if I took that first bullet point and said I go from HA to HA omega, surely that's trivial.
No, but it's the form of A, so A is translated to a different form, like the form of being.
Yeah.
There exists X for all Y.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can take a complicated formula, a logically complicated formula of HA, and you get this logically simple formula of
Oh, you
HA omega,
always
but possibly a
translate it to-
pi-type
So it's
complexity.
always of this.
It's always, this is the selling, this is in some sense what it gets you, that your target formula are never more complicated than this. It's quite different from Keeney style realizability, say, where you start with a complicated formula. The formula that says what it means for something to realize is kind of just as complicated as the formula you started with. So this is kind of why you get something different from this. Okay, so how do we give this translation? So yeah, this way of thinking in terms of defense and attack is the right way of thinking about it. And the key case here, which is really the most substantial case, is how we handle implication. So again, just suppressing our vector notation on variables. Suppose we've already translated our A to this, there exists for all formula here, and B to this similar formula here. How do we want to translate A implies B? Okay. So our first stab is, well, we just take the translation of A implies the translation of B. Okay. But this is clearly not of the form we want. It's not of the form that exists for all something quantifier free. Okay. Okay, however, if we think about what this means, and we think about, what would it mean to give some constructive content for that? We're saying, if there exists an X such that blah, then there exists a U such that blah. So a constructive reading of that might say, there's a function f which takes each suitable X to a suitable U. Okay, so let's put the exists on the outside. Let's say there exists an f such that for any suitable X, okay, if it is suitable in the sense that for all Y, P of Y, okay, then f of X is a suitable U over here. Okay, so we've got rid of these two exists here in favor of this exists and this for all. So this starts in the right way, starts off well, this formula. This is moving towards the kind of formula we want. Okay. But we're still not there done because this thing here isn't quantifier free. We've got this implies here with these for alls underneath it. So we need to go a bit further. So we're saying if for all Y something, then for all V something. So what might a constructive reading of that look like? Well, one thing we could say, sort of constructivize this, is that if we had a V that served as a counterexample to this Q here, we could get from that to a Y that served as a counterexample for P. Okay, so if you wanted to challenge this by saying, hang on, this doesn't work for this V, for a certain V here, then if we've got a way of producing a counterexample here, then we've defended the proposition as a whole, because we're saying your counterexample isn't a real doesn't count as a counterexample because the premise didn't hold. So in fact, if we say not only exists an F which takes an X to a U, but there is an H which takes a V to a Y, and in fact, yeah, emphasize the dependence on V, but actually X is also in scope. So H would also be allowed to know what the current X is. So we can say that we now say that for all X, which is a defense of the premise here, and for all V, which is a challenge to the conclusion, if Q fails, Okay, so if this attack on the conclusion succeeds, then this attack on the premise will also succeed. So this is a bit of a mind flip, but you can see that now we're in the right form, because we've got there exists and for all and something quantifier free. But of course, we can now clean it up a bit, because these are quantifier free formulae, so they'll be subject to classical logic. So we can just take the contrapositive of this and get this thing here, which looks incomprehensible taken in isolation, but if you sort of think through this way of arriving at it, that's how we have the interpretation of implication. Was there a question? No. Okay. Okay. So now you can see here how the type levels were going to increase with formula complexity, because this f and this h here are functions that act on the sort of existing entities. We have f and these h going to be usually higher types than these x and y and u and b, broadly speaking. So that's the sort of core idea. So that's worth taking time to digest. So, and it's also illuminating to look at a special case, which is negation. So we can treat negation, not A, as just A implies 0 equals 1.
Sorry, John, before you go on, can I ask a question going back?
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to make sure I've understood this. This last step, where you go from not Q implies not P to P implies Q, you note, we can do this because P and Q are quantifier free, so decidable.
Yes.
So this corresponds to the fact that once I have a decision procedure in AGDA, I'm essentially, as far as that thing concerned, in classical logic, because the decision procedure gives me P or not P.
Yeah.
Is that right?
You can just compute whether P is true or not. You know,
right. So this last step only works because P and Q being quantifier free means they're basically classical.
Yeah.
Because intuitionistically, we could not take this step.
Yeah, correct.
Intuitionistically, we could add 2 more knots, but getting rid of those knots is possible because P and Q are decidable.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood the intuition there. Thank you.
Okay, so let's think about the case of A implies 0 equals 1. And so it's a fact that 0 equals 1 translates to itself. So there's an empty list of x and y variables there. So it's trivial. And let's now look at how the translation works here. So if A already translates to there exists x for all y p, then so this is saying, you know, there is a defense of A such that for all attacks on A, the defense wins against the attack. So what does not A look like? Well, if you work it through, it says there's a function h which takes any proposed defense of A to an attack which will succeed against that defense. Okay, so if you want to argue not A, you propose as your defense a function which takes the defense of A and produces an attack on A that will succeed. So in the set, so attack succeeds is that we've got this negation here. That's just how what I had on the previous slide works out in the case of negation, where the treatment of 0 equals 1 is a bit trivial. And then, so this h has taken us up in type here. And now it's also worth seeing what not A looks like, because this is a commonly arising thing. Okay, so a witness for not A will be a function f, which took any operation h as above. Okay, so h is a thing which is trying to refute any, it's trying to refute any given defense of A. Okay, so to give for not A, we don't give an actual defense of A, but given any attempt to refute given any general attempt H to refute all potential defenses of A, we produce a defense of A such that attempt is not successful against it. So again, bit of mind twist here, but these rather dense formulae are the things one sort of has to ponder for a while and get one's head around. So so notice we're not giving an actual defense of A that can counter all attacks. All we're undertaking to do is to show what's wrong with any proposed refutation of A. So think of H as a proposed refutation of A. If someone proposes a refutation of A, we can show what's wrong with it. We can find a defense which locally, as it were, succeeds against that attack. We don't give a single defense that succeeds against all attacks, but we kind of defend, we kind of can do it locally. So the way I think about this is, suppose you might have some. Hi, yeah.
I was wondering, same way that you flipped the negation on the previous slide, did you remove the double negation from inside the quantifier?
You could. I just left it in because that's what the translation gives you.
Okay, but it wouldn't be a problem.
It would be it would be logically equivalent to for the same reason you could get rid of this, but this isn't. It's just
to show how you build it.
This is just to show what the translation gives you.
Once you have the witness that defends the attack, showing the negation is the same thing as proving the defense, right? Within the quantifiers.
Sure. These negations here.
Yeah.
These are just once you've instantiated your variables, it's just calculation.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't. You can.
Yeah.
It's the calculation, the computation that you do to prove not P or whatever. It's the same.
Is it then? Yes. You would evaluate P.
Yeah.
And you get true or false, and then you negate it twice. You flip it twice. Okay. Yes. Okay. The way I think about this is, supposing you had some quite deeply held moral or religious belief or something, and you're not sure that you can actually explain it or justify it in a way that would convince anyone else, but you might more modestly think, well, I can't do that. But you might more modestly think that if anyone claimed to have a knockdown argument against your belief, you would be able to show or pinpoint what was wrong with their argument. So that's a more modest thing, but that's kind of what we're doing here. Okay, so we're not giving a defense of A, but the point is, even these double negated formulae, we do get something substantial. Okay, so the existence of an F that does this, that's a real gadget that does something recognizable. So we get computational content, even formulae with loads of double negation around. Again, this is quite different from Kleene style realizability, where basically a double negation kills off any interesting computational or constructive content. We don't get anything interesting once we've stuck a double negation. But here we still do, and that's what means we get an informative interpretation of classical proofs. And so we can see we're going to have a lot of double negations around if we use this translation here. And notice anytime we have a double negation, we basically bump up the type level of witnesses by 2. Okay, so we start with this X here, this H is 1 type higher, and this F is 1 type higher still. So you can, in practice, get quite easily up to examples of 4th order, 5th order witnesses for things, which are kind of humanly a bit incomprehensible. But there we are. Okay, so I've given you the intuitions here. So now it just remains to give you sort of the gory details of what this translation is. So a bit of notation here. To every A in the source language, we're going to associate a translation like this. So A upper D, D for Dialectica, is going to be this, or exists for all formula, the body of which is going to be A lower D. Okay. And we're going to do this just by structural induction on A. And just for notion, so for the sake of the following clauses, we're going to suppose we've already translated A to this, and B to this, and C to this, which are all of this form. Okay, so atomic formulae just get translated by themselves, and we just have the empty lists of what exists as rules at the front. A and B is no surprise. So we have to give a defense of A and a defense of B, such that for any attack on A and attack on B, both defenses win against the corresponding attacks. Okay. Or we have a ground type variable which just basically acts as a flag to say whether we are giving a defense of A or a defense of B. So there exists a defense. So there exists basically a Boolean here, and then a defense of A and a defense of B, of which only one will actually be needed in any given instance. But because of the type, you kind of need to give both of them here, such that for any attacks on those, if it's A we're defending, then we win here. If it's B we're defending, we win here. Implies this is exactly the formula that we arrived at on the previous slide, so I won't say anything more about that. For a for all statement, yeah, so a defense of a for all statement will be a function which takes an argument and produces a defense of that instance of, so Z is the variable we're quantifying here. So a defense of a for all statement, which would be a function which, given a value for Z, produces a defense of the corresponding instance of the formula. And there exists is the easiest one of all. We just stick it because we're looking for a formula that starts with exists. We just add an extra exists variable. So this is the full thing. Just as an aside, it's worth noticing that we've got some assurance that this translation is kind of semantically reasonable, because in a strong system, stronger than the ones we're mainly thinking about today, you can prove that each formula is equivalent to its dialectica translation. So actually, we're not doing something completely crazy here that's violating the intended meaning of formula. But this isn't really relevant to the main point, which is the point that you can extract proofs. So, okay. So what's the main soundness theorem about this? The main theorem that says it's worth doing. So,
Got a question.
Sorry.
Can you go back one line? I mean, can you do prove one way without axiom of choice, or is it impossible?
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. That's a good question. I think not, because when you pass from formula to its negation, I think proving this one direction requires an induction hypothesis to prove in the other direction. So I don't think I think that they're all mixed up. I think.
I was expecting it to be HA rather than BA. You were starting with an HA formula. The aside. So.
And the aside.
Yeah, so you really need the sort of middle.
You can do it in HA plus blah, but I do. You need, the point is, this is a stronger. This is
no, HA plus AC. I meant.
No, HA plus AC isn't quite enough. You need a few more things.
But not taboos. Like
you don't need the whole of excluded middle, but you need Markov's principle and independence of premise, something like that.
Thanks.
I didn't want to write that in the slide, but yeah. Yeah, okay. So the basic theorem is, okay, if A is provable in HA omega, then basically, so is its translation, this formula A to the D, one of this form. But better than that, if you're given a particular proof of this within HA omega, from that proof, you can effectively extract particular system T terms, or T, that you can plug in for the X here, and you get that the inner part of the formula, the A lower D, is true for T and any Y. And moreover, that's provable within quantifier-free HA omega. Okay, so you get from something that's provable in all of HA omega to something that's provable in quantifier-free HA omega. That's the theorem. And the proof is just a big on. So the hypothesis here is that something's provable in HA omega. So the proof of this is just a big induction on the proof of this, with an induction case for each axiom of HA omega and each inference rule of HA omega. So it's a long proof to write out, like most of these things. Most of the cases are trivial. I'm just going to look at one sample case, which is one of the more interesting ones. So let's suppose we've got this logical axiom, A implies A and A. Okay, I'll try and speak. Okay, so those, if you do the translation on this, we have, there exists, first of all, F and G are forwards bits of evidence, mapping evidence for A to evidence for these two conjuncts here. And we can just use the identity for both of those. That's fine. And then this H will be the backward thing, which takes a challenge to A and produces a challenge to A. Now, of course, the idea is that for any successful attack on A and A could be used to attack A. But if we're given a successful attack, we need to know which conjunct it is that's being attacked in general. Is it this A that's being attacked or this A? So, yeah. So basically, you just take the you take the defense of A, and you take the attack on the first conjunct and the attack on the second conjunct, and you say, does the first attack succeed? If it is, that's the one you use. If it's not, then the second attack must succeed, so you just return that one. Okay, I'll try and speed up now to get to the sort of end point. So corollary to soundness is that supposing now we have a formula of this quite simple form, for all x there exists y such that something quantifier free. So this is the other way around from there exists for all. So for any theorem of this kind, you can use this interpretation to extract an actual t term which produces a suitable y from a suitable x. So from a proof of this, even a classical proof, well, no, this is in HA at the moment. But from a proof of this, you can extract a t term that produces your witnesses. Yeah, that's an easy corollary to what I've just told you. We can do even better, a bit better than that. We can extend this source language HA omega by even adding in some non-constructive stuff. So here's a thing called Markov's principle. This can't be proved in HA omega, but it still has a Dialectica witness. So you can harmlessly throw this in to this principle into your source system and still have this corollary that you can extract proofs. And in fact, so this is saying we can live with a certain amount of double negation here. We can still do this. And in fact, that's all we need to show that we get this corollary. This corollary works even for everything in PA. So supposing we assume that in PA we have a possibly classical proof of for all x there exists y something. Okay, so a proof that doesn't, on the face of it, give you a witness for the y. Then by putting these pieces together in the appropriate way, we can extract a system T term such that provably in this quantifier free system, T produces witnesses. Yeah. And once we've seen this, we can trivially read off that just by abstracting out the T of x here and replacing it by exists y, we can trivially see that HA omega proves this thing. Okay, because we prove something stronger here. So we've seen that if PA omega proves a theorem of this form, what's called a pi2 statement, in terms of its logical complexity, then HA omega also proves that pi2 statement. In other words, you can't, being classical doesn't give you any more provable statements of this form. Okay, Ohad is signaling me to cut there, so I will just leave this for perusal while I take questions.
It's very simple. So since the expected programs are system T
Yes.
programs, where does recursion come from? If it is used in the extracted program.
Well, recursion, I mean, in system T, you have these higher order primitive recursors, and that's all.
Is it needed in the extracted program for the?
If you have any sort of proof by induction,
Oh, right.
then your extracted program will involve recursion. And the more complex the formula you're doing induction on, the higher the type of the recursion that you'll need.
Yes.
Good question. Good
No,
question.
I should have known. Thanks.
Yeah, could you go to the statement of the theorem, please? Just the main theorem.
The main soundness theorem.
Yes. Yes. So it basically, so it says that from an HA omega proof of A, you can extract those terms.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that like, does it rely really on the fact that, like, is this just doing some quantifier elimination that you can do generally in HA omega whenever you have something of the form exists for all, you can find the term, or is it specifically that it's only true for things of the form that of a translation?
No. The A here can be anything at all. The A here doesn't have to be over.
No, sure, but on the other, so does that so you do the translation?
Yes.
And then the question is, so for things that are translations, you can basically eliminate the essential quantifier.
Well,
like
you provide a specific witness for the exercise. Yes.
Yeah. But so is that only true for things that are translations, or or is it true that whenever I have something of the form exists for all?
Yeah, okay, right. If you can prove there exists, yeah, you can, okay, you can in general get from any proof in HA omega that there exists. I think you can get a term such that it's provable in HA omega that the thing satisfies, but you don't in general get this provable in this. To get this provable in this quantifier free system, I think it needs to be this more special situation.
Okay.
I think, yeah, saying that this is provable in quantifier free HA omega is stronger. James is sort of nodding cautiously. Okay. So yeah, there is something that's true in HA omega quite generally, which is this existence property that for a proof that there exists, you can get a witness. But what you can say about that witness is not quite as strong as this.
Okay, thank you.
So you illustrated how the particular ordering exists, and therefore means you do these ingenious things, but end up in raising the types a lot. Is there a dummies reason why doing a translation that targeted for exists would not do the job?
It comes. I mean, you want to extract an actual program about which you can say something. I don't quite see how.
Okay. It's just
Yeah. I mean, the exists corresponds to the fact that I'm going to extract a real concrete thing here. Yeah. I think you want that to be on the outside. I think. Otherwise, yeah, I don't quite see it.
Any more questions? Yes.
Something. Everywhere.
So we got, I think I got selected by, all right, but, so whenever we have a logic, we have a corresponding program language.
Right.
What does the programming language corresponding to piano arithmetic look like? So what if we have proofs involving these quantifiers?
Yes.
And if we interpret proofs as programs, how should we view those programs? So what I'm trying to do is take what you've done where you've gone from one logic into a system, maybe is viewed as a programming language, can be viewed as a programming language, and I'm saying, well, can we view this as a translation?
Is it like we would? I'm just, my brain's getting this at the moment, I'm just having a bit, yeah.
So I'm just imagining, we have some proof that involves for it exists and for alls. We could presumably write down some kind of term language for describing that proof system. Just directly, without doing the dialectic through interpretation.
I don't,
Or even.
I don't know if you could, I think you pretty much led to the dialectic interpretation pretty much precisely by trying to do what you say, I think.
Oh, I see.
I think system T is the programming language
the only
underlying.
language underlying arithmetic.
Well, I wouldn't say it, the only one, but it's the one you're
No, I was just wondering if there's something more direct.
There's
might be weird.
types sort of get, you sort of, type will just get in there naturally from where when it implies. Yeah, maybe there's something else out there, but I don't have a.
I'm just thinking along the lines of other more esoteric logics people have come up with sort of term languages for them.
Yes.
That are maybe quite often a bit weird, but
yeah.
I wondered if there was something weird that was not system T, but was more directly corresponding to the proofs, but maybe that's.
I've not heard of such a thing.
Keith and James.
So instead of translating the documentation, bulked up the order of the witnesses. Is there some general practice of things that will avoid from intending for the witness to then plus order of the witness? So should I expect that all kind of proving that involve induction to have increasingly higher order types or things like this?
Induction itself doesn't get you.
John, could you please repeat the question before answering it? That was not clear to people online.
I'm not sure I heard the question very well myself. I know. Would you be willing to come up and ask?
Talking louder. So you mentioned.
Sorry, I just asked you to repeat the question.
I didn't hear the question myself, so.
Can we repeat the question? Just a second.
So the double negation. If you're a higher order witness.
Yes.
Other classes of things like successively increase the order.
So what kind of proof structures increase the order of the witnesses? So we know induction does.
I see.
Then maybe induction or other kinds of proof.
Yeah. So the order of the witnesses is determined by the complexity of the formula. It's not so much what rules you're using, but just what formulae that you're using. So just by looking at the formulae in the proof, you can tell what the complexity.
Are there kind of constructive ways of always increase, like if I take people? If in classical logic you have a long alternating sequence of for all exists, for all exists, for all exists, that will, when you translate that to HA, you'll get for all not exists, for all not exists, for all not, and those nots will bump up the complexity for you. So anything that's high up in the classical arithmetic hierarchy will take you to high types. Does that sort of thing? Yeah.
James, you had a question?
Yeah. Excuse me. We know in ordinary proof theory that certain things on the left-hand side of an implication won't materially affect the functionals we extract. If we look in the negative fragment,
yes,
or Harrop formulae,
yes,
they won't contribute anything.
They don't have computational clout.
So do you see that in the interpretation, or is that a second step to observe that some of the translations?
You pretty much see that some translations are trivial.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. If you have just for all something for all x something quantifier free, that has no computational content, as it were. Well, you don't defend it. It just gets attacked and it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So if you have that,
the orthodox phenomena of proof theory are visible.
Yeah.
in the construction of the functions.
Yeah, you don't really have to work to see. You can just see that certain translation of certain in dialectical interpretations of certain kinds of formula are trivial and don't contribute anything.
Yeah, following up on Kim's question, is there like an explanation for what formulas you can prove up to a given type level?
Yeah, you can stratify. You remember last time I said that system T, you can stratify it as system T0, T1, and T. So that's reflected in fragments of the logic. So if you wanted to do interpretations up to a given logical complexity, then system T, the fragment TK is sufficient for doing that. And there's some quite interesting results about what you can do in T0. There's some interesting proof theoretic results about what functions are provably total in system with a certain amount of induction. So yes, good question. There's a certain amount of fun to be had there.
Can I ask a question? Now that you answered that, I have a follow-up question, which is what is the interest in that does it have any operational meaning that you can prove it in up to a certain level? Does it tell you something about the computations other than the types that you need?
Does the sort of type boundary
level types, what does that give you?
Does that give you? I mean, it restricts the class of functions. It limits the class of functions you can write. You can write strictly more functions. These higher things. I'm not, but I'm not.
Why would that be good? What would that be interesting?
Well, I mean, if you're interested in these proof theoretic applications of what can you do in certain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lynn has a question. Lynn, can you mute?
Yes, I had a kind of more a comment to what Sam was asking about varying logic and then varying getting a varying programming language. I have this kind of broader view. I'm sorry to bore everyone with this again and again, but this broader view of strategies. And so in that, these Dialectica, the dialectical interpretation is a strategy, a way of viewing proofs as strategies. And it so happens, of course, that you can interpret it in a functional way, but you could well imagine that there might be more complicated logics for which a functional way of looking at things is not going to work, but then a programming language based on strategies would work. So I think there's perhaps a broader perspective where one has more broad logics which require perhaps broader languages than we currently are thinking of. I don't know if that makes sense or if I'm being clear or unclear. It's very hot in this room, so I'm feeling very sleepy.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Lynn. Okay. Any more questions from the room? Anton?
Another way to it. Like if I look at your syntax type as a keyword, I would also envision that you could add something like a recursive type. And maybe if you had recursive types, you could create types which have infinite level by just recursion on the side of that.
I think once you add recursive types, you pretty much inevitably take yourself outside the world of total functions. Once you've got a recursive type, you can get a general fixed point complex. So we take ourselves into the other world there, which I'll be
next week.
So I have this one last slide about program extraction of an example. So there's classical. There's one last slide which I could talk about for two minutes of an example of an extraction of something from a classical proof, and then I had some slides on bar recursion. So we've got this classical theorem. This relates to the exercise I had last time. So for any p is a free variable again. So so either Pm is even for infinitely many p, or Pm is odd for infinitely. Okay, so quickly, we've got this classically trivial theorem here that says P has either infinitely many even values or infinitely many odd values. But you can't expect to prove this constructively because in general, no way to tell which of these disjuncts is going to be true. So let's see what the dialectical interpretation of this produces, and let's treat this as a sentence of hating arithmetic, and let's focus on the double negation of J. Okay. So what would the defense of J look like? Okay, it will be a triple where Z tells you which disjunct you're defending, and then F and G are defenses of the relevant F and G are respective defenses of the two disjuncts, of which you'll only be interested in one. So the F and the G will be functions that take an N to an M here. Okay. What would the defense of not J look like? Okay. So it will be a function H that takes such a defense of J to an N that refutes it. Okay, in the sense that either one or the other disjuncts, you'll get an N such that either there's no even number past, there's no even value of P beyond N, or there's no odd value of P beyond N. What would the defense of not J look like? It would be a third order function phi that takes a thing like that and gives you a defense of J against which that H fails to work. Okay, so it's given an H as above, it just yields a defense of J which H doesn't refute, in the sense that the supposed counterexample the supposed counterexample produced by H. Sorry, I'm going to look into too much detail. It's something like that, and you can get this really gnarly third order program out of it. You might find it's not obvious that you can write a program that does this, but you get what if you want to. There's no short thing to say about that program, so you can ponder that. Okay. Okay, shall I say a bit about bar recursion, what it is? So think about well-founded trees, and we think about trees with branches from any node indexed by any type of sigma, if you like. Think about the case where sigma is n sanity. So think about countably branching trees like this. And they're well-founded, which meaning that no path, there's no infinite paths through this tree. So you can imagine there's this kind of bar underneath that. So if we want to define a function from nodes of this tree, we want to define it by recursions, starting from the leaves and working upwards. The ingredient we want a leaf function, which says if we've got a leaf node of this tree, we can assign a value at that node. And then we've got a branch function, which says that if we're at a certain node, and we've got values for all the immediate children of that node, so this is a function from C, then we can get the value of at that node. So this branch function is already a second order thing. Okay. And so bar recursion basically takes a well-founded tree and a leaf function and a branch function and produces a function on those the tree. Okay. So these things have types we can write down, but the question here is how do we present a well-founded tree as a thing of simple type? And this is Spector's trick. Well, why I say Spector's first tricks, because there are many tricks involved in Spector's amazing construction. So the idea is that so we've got a function W of this type, and n arrow sigma is to be thought of here as a set of potential infinite paths. So each sigma is a branching, and we've got potential infinite paths. So what I'm going to claim is any second order function W here, if it's continuous, can be construed as a way of presenting a well-founded tree. So
Yeah. The idea is that because this is continuous, for any path you follow, if you follow it far enough down, you'll reach the point where you're within the modulus of continuity of that path. So any extensions, any way you choose to extend your path from there on will produce the same value. Okay. So we've got a path P. We look at, first thing you look at what the value of W at P is. Okay, that'll be a certain value. And then you make sure your path is at least as long as that. Okay, and that your path is within this modulus neighborhood of continuity. Okay, then it will be the case that you've got that finite bit of path, P0 up to P r minus 1, then because we're assuming that W of P is less than R, and we're within the neighborhood, we'll also have this W of P of this extension, where we go from, we have these R values here, and then we have zeros for it. And the point is that this is a testable condition. This is a thing you can actually compute, given W. So given any W, if you look at the set of finite R's, such that basically for any, so I should say this condition here, think of this as this is like the condition for exiting from the tree. Once you have this, you've left the tree. Okay. So if we look at the set of finite sequences such that no subsequence of them has left the tree yet, okay, this will be a well-founded tree, okay? And any continuous W will give you one such. So it's a way of ensuring that anything you write down presents a well-founded tree. Okay? So that's quite clever. And this stopping condition here looks kind of arbitrary, it's a bit of a hack, but there's kind of deep reasons why it works in conjunction with the rest of Spector's interpretation. So putting it all together, we have a bar recursion operator. It's a thing which takes a W functional, which presents a tree in this way, and then a leaf function and a branch function, and at the end of the day produces a function on nodes of this tree. So yeah, think about it. So wait, think about it. We don't care what the values of this function are going to be on things outside the tree. It'll give you something, but we're only interested in thinking of this as a function on those tree. So you can add these. Now this is a total operation because any continuous W and everything with a circularity here. Anything you can define in this language will be computable and therefore continuous. Okay, and if this operation here is continuous, then it will present a well-founded tree, so we'll get a well-defined operation here. And you can make this precise and say if you extend system T with these bar recursors, then we still have a language of total functionals. We give a decent operational semantics or improved strong termination, and so on. Okay, so pretty much what so use just it's very hard to say. Yeah, there's a lot to it. So but basically, Spector showed that using this system instead of T, you can extend the Dialectica style interpretation not just from PA omega to PA omega plus comprehension axioms for all predicates on numbers that you can write in this language. So this is very powerful. So it's just saying for every property B that you can write in this language, there's a characteristic function in your world of functions. So this allows for highly impredicative definitions of functions, because you can write functions whose definitions for which it's defined by formula B, which make reference to the totality of all functions of which the function you're trying to define is y. So very strong system, strong enough for most of classical analysis. Highly impredicative, highly non-constructive. So to my mind, really amazing that it's possible to get make any kind of computational sense of proofs in this system. Okay, so the first thing to say about Spector's interpretation is it's amazing. Second is it's hard to understand because it involves, I would say, at least 4 ingredients that are hard to understand even individually in themselves. And then to see how they fit together in some kind of miraculous way to work is also difficult. So the first 2 of the hard ingredients is standard dialectica, which I've talked about. That's going to be quite hard. And bar recursion, which I've given you a tour of, that's also quite hard. And then there are at least 2 more, which I haven't prepared.
So you said the details are in the book draft, but presumably they're in the old version of the book as well.
No,
they're not.
No. Yeah, this is application in the T. I mean, bar recursion is in the old book, but Spector's interpretation isn't. I can highly recommend this paper by Karen Oliva, which has helped me a lot, sort of titled like Understanding Spector's Bar Recursion or something like that, which I found easily the most helpful thing getting. So really just sort of like that this exists. And bar recursion is interesting in other ways in how the computability is. And in terms of applications, so Ulrich Kohlenbach has gone further than anyone else in actually using this to extract content, to mine content from proofs in classical analysis and get actually new quantitative results of interest to analysts out of it. So it's I don't know too much about that, but it's amazing work. So you know, this has something to say to classical mathematicians.